It's taper time. My neighbors definitely just watched me do this with their dog. This is so embarrassing. Hi there, my friends, and welcome back. We are officially in the marathon taper, and to say I am relieved is really underselling it. If you didn't pick up in the vlogs, I have done so many long runs on weekdays. I have been traveling so much this marathon. I missed an 18-mile long run because my dog got sick, and then I went to Switzerland for 10 days. I missed 10 days of training while being in Switzerland, and then I traveled twice last month during this to the peaking of my marathon. So all of my long runs, except for 2, and my whole like 8 to 10 week marathon buildup were done on a weekday, whether that was a Wednesday or a Thursday or a Friday or a Monday, but we got it done. And we are done. I did my last long run yesterday, which was my first taper long run after a week of travel and not being able to do it last weekend. So we are officially, now that we're done with that, in the true like 2-week taper where volume is truly reduced. We're really focusing on recovery and really dialing into things. So I need to walk my dog real quick, take her on a quick bathroom break. So I'm gonna take you through chatting tapering and what it is while I do that. And then I'm gonna take you through my final lift of this marathon training block and talk about what I do when I think about how I approach lifting with the taper, what I'm doing, what I'm not doing, when to pull back, all the things you guys always have questions for. Let's chat about it. So first, Kona, you wanna go pee? So let's dive into a little bit of taper science because that's what you guys want to hear. So when we think about tapering specifically for something like a marathon or an ultra marathon, typically what I've tapered for and shared in the past is there's kind of 2 approaches or 2 ways of thinking, and that's really the 3 versus the 2-week taper. And so when we think about this physiologically and in studies, there doesn't appear to be as much of a difference, and it likely comes down to the athlete, experience level, training volume, and or just like how you've responded in trial and error in the past. I have typically always done a 3-week taper for my bigger races. Usually they have a higher overall volume, so weekly mileage, and or I am someone who I think feels better with a little bit more recovery. And since I'm more prone to like nags and niggles and stuff with my hypermobility, I like that little build-in of extra recovery. And I never really feel like the first week of a 3-week taper is really the taper. It's really the final 2 weeks that start to feel like a true taper. So in a 3-week taper, essentially you're gonna pull back volume that first week after your peak week. So for example, my peak week was a 20-mile long run and 49 miles. I missed that 50th mile, and that's okay. Then you pull back by maybe 10, 15, maybe 20%. So technically I did my long run yesterday, even though that should have been on last weekend. So we're gonna pretend that mileage was in the week before. And I think I ended up getting about 40 miles in, if you factor in my 14 miles yesterday, with the running that I did the previous week. So somewhere around 39 to 40 miles. So I pulled back, I guess that's probably about 20% going from 50 to 40, give or take. I was also traveling, things weren't perfect, but I felt pretty good about that. So I still kept it relatively kind of almost like a deload training week. I still did that 14-mile long run with pickups, keeping quality in there. I still did a 9-mile run last week. I still did speed workouts. Like I still had a lot of really higher quality stuff in there. It wasn't a full recovery, full taper. We still were trying to stay sharp and getting things in, but that long run was pulled back. Most of that mileage was coming from a pulled back long run rather than my weekly mileage and volume. So this week is the first true week or 2 weeks out of my taper. And so I'm gonna pull back even more. So we're gonna pull back, oh man, I took Kona's peeing. Sorry, Kona, I'm gonna give you some privacy. But essentially then the next week of that, you're pulling back then again to somewhere like 50 to 60% of your max volume, give or take. I'll leave a note for my videographer to correct me on the screen or make a chart for you guys or something with this. On that second week, so essentially you're titrating it down. You're pulling it down from max highest peak volume, pulling back a little bit, but not a ton, and then pulling it back more significantly, really making space for recovery and reducing volume. And then you go into race week at around somewhere into like maybe 25, 30, 40% of your peak volume that you were doing for your race peak and prep. But really, you're not, obviously the race is the long run on that final week. And the biggest thing is during, especially the 2 weeks out, the 10 to 14 days, that's really the time period that you really want to focus on recovery, which is why, you know, that long run was done a little bit late, but it really still was like kind of right outside that 10-day window, which is why I wanted to get it in yesterday. And I'm going to do my final lower body lift today, so I can really focus on recovery for the next 10 days going into the race. And so the reason we want to do this is we want to decrease inflammation, increase recovery. we're increasing or encouraging glycogen resynthesis and or increasing our glycogen storage. This comes from both the recovery process, but also nutrition and also the carb loading process, which I will do next week, as well as just overall letting your body more or less just absorb the big block of training we just did. Peaking for any race is the highest, hardest, most, fatiguing physiologically and or stressful and strainful in our bodies. So really trying to like absorb that fitness and be recovered and fresh. There's neurological recovery, like the body, your brains and nervous system's contractility of your muscles. All of this stuff is recovering and repairing in this taper process so that you are essentially at your freshest and your peak and your most primed when you get to race day. So you do not want to skip the taper if you're trying to peak for an A race or a goal race. Then of course, the alternative there to I did a 3-week taper is a 2-week taper. And that's a little bit more aggressive where you still train up and through the 3rd week. And then 2 weeks out, you're really cutting volume by 50 to 60%, like right away. It's a very quick decrease. And then to that lower percent on the week 2. And again, it's really just about titrating volume down to make space for recovery. So you're not continuing to build fatigue with your training. And so it's all about just recovering and getting ready for race day and being ready for your best and fastest performance. You can kind of flounder a little bit with the taper. Some people prefer, I'm tangled into her leash. Some people prefer the 2-week taper to the 3-week taper just to maintain some sharpness and or that edge of speed. But I want you guys to keep in mind, like when I did some quality stuff in that long run, I just did this past yesterday, which was technically last week's long run, but I will do another quality, like tiny mini quality session this week. I'm going to do that tomorrow. I mean, I'm kind of doing back-to-back harder days a little bit here, but my leg day won't be very strenuous here. And then keeping in some things like pickups and or striders and or a little bit of sharpness and intensity in my long run this weekend, as well as next week, like for my shakeout runs going into the race. The goal isn't to just pull back all of your intensity. You want to keep a little bit of that intensity so that you're sharp for the race day. The goal is to pull back the volume. So really like the mileage that you're pounding, that's where a lot of that recovery is going to come from. But you don't want to lose the speed and the sharpness that you've worked so hard to refine within the taper. You can keep and should keep intensity proportional to what you're doing and not remove it altogether. It's just that you don't want to do any like really, really hard, you don't want to go and do like a VO2 max workout the week of your race, like things like that. So it's about proportionally decreasing it, but not removing it entirely so we can stay sharp. So I've worked so hard this marathon training cycle. I crushed my 20 milers. So no matter how the race goes, I feel really proud about that. But I do want to maintain that turnover on my legs, especially for like marathon level efforts. So like my striders next week are mostly going to be in that like marathon to half marathon pace effort. Not, much faster than that, things like that. So keeping that sharpness specifically for the race and what I'm training. So I'm going to go do my final lift, lower body lift here. And then we'll chat a little bit like how I approach lifting and or when to remove it, what to think about with that, all of that stuff with this as well. So let's go. Come on. No, hey. All right, guys, I am back home with my notes that I intentionally took and totally did not relate to you correctly. So for 3-week taper, like I am doing here, you're pulling back volume in the first week of the taper by about 10 to 20%, which is what I did last week. And then next week, so 2 weeks out, about 35 to 50% pulled back from your total peak volume. So for me, I peaked at 49. So it's going to be like 25 to 33 miles a week this week specifically. Again, I'll be a little wonky because I ended up doing last week's long run as part of this week, but I'm only going to count my mileage this week. So I'll have a 10-mile long run this weekend, a little bit of quality work in it, and then I'll fill in the gaps with the rest of my runs this week with one last quality session that I'll do tomorrow. And then on race week, you're pulling back even more significantly, like 60 to 75% less of your peak volume. And then obviously you have the race on top of that. So I'll do a few shakeout runs, easy runs, maybe something a little bit slightly moderate in duration earlier in the week next week, but nothing too crazy, a little bit of quality and intensity mixed in. But again, nothing that's overly fatiguing me. The goal essentially from tomorrow on is fully recovery mode. Like that 10 days out mark is really where that magic happens, about 10 to 14 days. Now, obviously a 2-week taper is going to be more aggressive so that it's going to have a steeper initial reduction because you'd be training through that 3rd week of about 40 to 50% reduction. And then obviously 60 to 70% of your total volume in that race week. So again, it's just more gradual versus more aggressive, and you can figure out what works for you. Typically in my programs, I do 3-week tapers for marathon ultra distance races with that 3 weeks out still being a decent amount of training volume, and then 2 or 1 week tapers for shorter distance races, just depending on what you're doing. So I'm gonna hop into this lift, and I think my husband's waiting to come into the gym. Are you waiting? He's patiently waiting. Okay, you can come out now. All right, so I'm in the TL map, and I've been following the race lifting program, which is essentially our program that adjusts the volume, intensity, and or tapers for you into your race. And since I'm 2 weeks out, our lovely instructions say that this is an optional week of lifting. We tell clients they can remove it as early as 3 weeks out if they're having a hard time managing it all. 2 weeks out is optional. 1 week out, we recommend nobody lifts, especially for an A race, unless they're training through it. So what I'm gonna do, instead of skipping lifting entirely this week, I typically do not lift at all 2 weeks out from goal races. You've seen in other vlogs from past years, I've lifted through races that I'm training through. But if I have a goal race, I typically remove lifting 14 days out. So I did my last heavy, hard leg days and leg movements last week, 3 weeks out. But what I'm doing today is I'm not really fully lifting. The goal is not to get stronger. The goal is not to gain muscle and progressively overload and all that stuff right now at this point in training. For me, this is injury prevention and or feeling sturdy and strong, not muscle breakdown, not excessive fatigue. So that's the difference. So instead of removing this all together, I'm just gonna combine most of the day 2 full body stuff, which has things that I wanna do like the side step ups and rotational RDLs, calf raises, things like that. And then some of the hip friendly stuff like super clams from the other full body day, really the stuff that supports a lot of my past injuries. So Achilles, feet, ankles, outer glutes, things like that, so that those things feel strong. But I'm not gonna be loading them to the true high RPEs of like an 8 out of 10 like I typically do. I'm gonna keep it conservative. The goal is really kind of going through the motions and adding enough load, but nothing that's fatiguing or more than what I've been doing, so it's not recoverable. And this is the last time I'll really touch legs going into next week, other than maybe doing some like mobility or isometrics of things if anything feels kind of chirpy next week. But the goal is really just going to be to do this final little bit of support work and then really lean into recovery the next week and a half before race day. So let's do it. Do you want to tell the people any advice for marathon tapering?
No.
Here you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
You binge a lot in your life.
Can I use my map?
I'm using it.
I'm vlogging. And I said, no, baby. I know you saw Jack. Oh my God, this vlog is a disaster. Kona, sit down. Kona. No, honey. It just says if I put my camera right where he's watching, I'd get a lot of views. Would you be my #1 subscriber? I unblocked you on Instagram. Do you want to follow me? Friends, that is done and dusted. Super simple, super easy, straightforward. Nothing about that was like high fatiguing, high volume, really, really muscular demanding. I pulled everything back to like an RPE 5 to 6, nothing crazy loaded. I just wanted to get that stimulus on my lower body. Especially I still have some of that chirpiness in my glute med here, and then obviously I have history of foot, Achilles, calf stuff. I transparently have gotten dry needled like every single week for this training cycle for the last 8 weeks, and it has been phenomenally helpful. Especially I'm hypermobile, and so a lot of my body just compensates all the time for everything that it's doing. So I feel so good about how good I feel despite the road mileage and pounding this year, but I really wanna make sure I feel that good on race day. So really low intensity, just getting the stimulus there of this. We did the side step ups, the single leg RDLs, the super clams, the hip 90-90 rotations, some dead bug core and calves, really just getting the things that I need to get in and not overly stressing or straining my body. Again, the goal of doing this was not to get fitter and better. It was just to keep kind of maintenance mode on and my body feeling healthy and good as we head into race day next Saturday. So if you missed my husband's game is playing. hopefully you guys are getting the real life reality of my vlogging here today. So we are heading into race day next Saturday. I am so excited. There's over like 50 clients coming to this race. And I think when you guys watch this vlog, it will be next Friday, which will be the day before the race starts. And so I really hope the day goes well. But if anything, I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to race and meet and just be a part of the TLM community, regardless of how my day goes. It's no surprise if you didn't watch my last vlog that I'm aiming for sub 4. I should have sub 4. I mean, even if I trained my training paces, no tapering or recovery, theoretically, I was in sub 4 range unless I blow up for mile 20. But I know a marathon is a lot of miles, a lot of things can happen. You can hit the wall. I don't know what will happen. So I don't want to put too much pressure on the day because everything I do is a PR that day, and same thing goes for you guys in your first big races. But the process is the magic. The process has been part of it. So I really hope you guys have enjoyed following along. I have literally documented my return to ultra 50 miler year, coming back from that injury the year before, into my 100 miler last year, now this year through the 3 High Rocks races and this marathon. So if you are new here and you haven't dove into all this like me again, guys, I have documented the process for years now and really shown this comeback. And regardless of how race day goes, like I have dedicated this entire past year to getting faster, and we sure as hell did that. And it's been so fun and so hard. But regardless of how next week goes, just like I felt going to my 100 miler last year, like I'm proud of the person I am showing up to the start line. I am proud of the work that I did. I am happy and satisfied with the progress I've made this year, regardless of how next week goes. Honestly, to the point that I really felt this week that I could just take a deload week and then go into a bigger next new training cycle and feel really content, which is this is exactly what I wanted out of this year. But you know, it's been fun now in retrospect being able to look back with you guys here in my YouTube community who've been here this whole process of coming back from my injury, finishing my PhD, into return to ultra, into 100 miler year, and now this High Rocks marathon year with more exciting races to come next year. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being part of this virtual community, even if you aren't part of the in-person community at Richmond next week. And if there's anything you guys would like to see from me, recovery, off-season, vlogging, training for my next goals and races, which I've technically already signed up for, let me know below, and I would love to take you along for the journey. Otherwise, thank you for being here. Happy tapering recovery season, wherever you're at in your training this year. And remember, your 2026 goals start now, and don't wait and stop training over the winter if you have big goals next year. The long game, the long road is the shortcut. I'll see you guys in my next video. Thanks for being here.